Hello and welcome to Raider HQ After Dark. I'm your host, Raider. And in this video, what I want to do is I want to address it seems to be creeping up on the number of comments that I get about it, is the 100-mile rule. And basically, what does that mean and what am I talking about? Because I reference it quite a bit, and it's not something that's easily found and it's something that's not well understood, specifically by VA staff. Okay, like that's the part that I need to understand. That I want to just preface this with. I'm going to go into the actual definition of it in a minute, but what I want to start out with is the VA, the QRT, like the regional QRT, is telling the local QRT type thing, the best teams and all that stuff. The overall leadership is disseminating down to the training level to where it gets trained into the newer people that the 100-mile rule, if the veteran lives more than 100 miles from the private DBQ filler outer person, then that is potentially inauthenticity and it's potentially fraud. But the problem with this is the word potentially, when QRT trains staff, they have a stroke and forget the word potentially. And they make this inference that, okay, if it's more than 100 miles away, then you should look at it as fraud, is the way that I have been hearing it. I counter that going, no, 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 that is not something that you can use exclusively to discount the private DBQ. But QRT are also giving errors for it. So it's being reinforced, this 100-mile rule. But let me show it to you. So, and this will be a shorter video. Whenever a private DBQ is received, there's a whole bunch of reviews that are done on it, oftentimes combined together. They're not separately done, but like the VSR will do a review, and they should be pulling up this manual reference right here for potential indicators of inauthenticity of a private DBQ. And what we're talking about is non-VA provider identified on the DBQ, which makes me laugh because the VA providers don't fill out the DBQs generally. So, I don't know. That's just a pet peeve of mine because the VA providers should be doing that. Has contact information that is unverifiable or contains discrepancies. Now, this right here, I've mentioned this a few times. This little manual reference, if the NPI number doesn't match, like if the NPI registry website information doesn't match the address or contact information that's on the private DBQ, then this can be inauthentic. That's the way the VSR or the Raider can use that particular discrepancy to inauthenticate your particular private DBQ. And it's legal for them to do that. That's within their scope. It says it right here that they can do that. Now, the potential part is, can you win on a higher level review if you challenge the inauthenticity finding? Potentially. But keep in mind, when you send it to a higher level review, you're sending it to a DRO, and DROs are technically part of the QRT echelon of staff members, and they're the ones disseminating this information that, the 100-mile rule, at least, that inauthenticity is a thing and we should be pushing inauthenticity. Now, what I was talking about with the 100-mile rule is that this right here is located, that the provider, right, because that's what we're referencing, the non-VA provider is located an unreasonable distance away, generally more than 100 miles. Now, unfortunately, what has happened is the VSRs and Raiders have grabbed onto this 100 miles right here because they listed it. They could have put 102 miles on here, but this is the standard that they're using. It doesn't say absolutely more than 100 miles. It doesn't say sometimes more than 100 miles. It's just they threw out a number, generally more than 100 miles away. And the VA staff has grabbed onto this like it's a life preserver. So that way they can potentially make the DBQ inauthentic. And it's from the veteran's place of residence. And yet the provider reported regularly seeing the veteran. Now, this right here is the problem. They're taking this and they stop reading right here. Well, actually, they read all this and then they stop reading. This is what is happening, is that the VSRs and the raters read to here, stop reading, and then they don't read this. Regularly see, that the provider reported regularly seeing the veteran as a patient or that the examination was completed in person. These are qualifiers. Like, it's an unreasonable distance and they report seeing the veteran all the time. Well, I had one instance of this where, and this is just an example of why you can't take this statement at face value. Long haul truck driver. I had a long haul truck driver's claim that I did one time, and they had a regularly assigned route from this state to this state, and they'd have a layover at that state. So what they'd have a few days. So sometimes they would go and see the VA over there, or see a private doctor over there, and see the VA back at their home. So, and they let this was established. It wasn't just make believe. Like, it was established in the VA records that the veteran did this, and the veteran would regularly give the documents back to the VA. And the VSR, because of the 100 miles away, their provider that they were at the end of their trip filled out their DBQ, which was 700 miles away. So what happened is that the VSR discounted it just based on the fact that the examiner was 100 miles away. These dogs. Okay. But that's not actually accurate, because it didn't, the facts of the situation said, okay, that's normal. There's no fraud here. It's just the circumstances of the veteran's, situation. So whenever I talk about the 100-mile rule, it's become a rule. QRT has been pushing the 100-mile rule a lot, to where any kind of indicator of potential inauthenticity is in fact fraud. Because this is not fraud, right? This isn't in a section for fraud. It's just inauthentic. So why do I keep bringing this up? I keep bringing this up because of one thing. We'll just go with one thing. I have a concern. And my concern is that if the VA keeps harping on the private DBQs, then they're going to force veterans to do actual fraud. Okay. And as a means of survival, because I'll tell you what, I will not use VA providers personally. It's just a personal preference, personal choice, because there are times whenever I go in and see a nurse practitioner or whatever, and I'm not hating on nurse practitioners, but they do have, they're up there with QRT for me, just because sometimes you get good ones, sometimes you get bad ones. But oftentimes you'll have a nurse practitioner that overrides like a specialist, and they can somehow do that, and the VA accommodates that, and that's what annoys me. It's not the nurse practitioners themselves. It's just the way the VA allows a lesser qualified individual to override a specialist or a more qualified individual, and that shouldn't be allowed. But what I'm talking about is the VA, if they keep leaning into this 100 miles and they don't get this under control, then what's going to happen is, and this is just a prediction, you're going to have veterans who start changing their address in the VA system, because the VA system has to be the section that reports, like, your home of record is per the VA, not per the postal service, right? So what I have seen relatively recently is people changing their address to within 100 miles of the provider, and then actually on their 526EZ or whatnot, changing their address in va.gov, and then when they, like a month before they file their claim, and then on it put the address that they have changed it to, and then belowhand put a temporary address of where they live right now, which is just the weirdest thing. But to work around to where the private DBQ just isn't tossed based upon some arbitrary, misrepresented factoid that the VSR and Raider use to push their own personal bias. So I have noticed people changing their address to try to get around this instant trash can situation, this administrative throw it in the trash can type scenario. We're already at 10 minutes, so it's not going to be short. But what happens if the veteran does that? And I'm not like, somebody might say, well, Raider, you're telling somebody how to cheat the system. This is fraud. I'm explaining that this is fraud, because fraud is when the facts are intentionally misrepresented, such as where you live. So I am not advising anybody to do that. But what I'm saying is that the VA's behavioral norms in their frontline staff are going to force veterans to have to, get E4 creative, the E4 mafia creative in how they go about it. Because this isn't like, hey, look, your medical evidence doesn't show you have a diagnosis. No, this has nothing to do with anything that actually matters for your claim. It doesn't discount whether or not your evidence on that DBQ is true or false. It's just an arbitrary way where the people with spite and personal bias can invoke it on you. And it bothers me because people sometimes pay a lot of money for an evidentiary review, for a physical assessment, right? The VA does physical assessments all the time on people. You go into therapy, like you want to go to therapy, you have an intake assessment. That intake assessment is where they do a provisional diagnosis and they do all those things like that. And they get you situated, especially in mental health, they get you situated to determine whether or not you need like PCMHI, BHIP, like either short-term mental health treatment or long-term mental health treatment for more severe injuries. That intake assessment is basically what the VA does on a daily basis for thousands upon thousands of veterans. That's what you're paying another person to do. It's not like it's a shady thing. Everybody does an intake assessment where they just determine, they do an evidentiary review, they do a provisional diagnosis, they kind of see how disabled you are. So the fact that you live 100 miles from the person is not an indicator of inauthenticity. It's a potential indicator of inauthenticity that should be weighed with other circumstances of inauthenticity. Like if there's discrepancies in the statements made by the examiner, like he has I say this in the other one, he has a normal gait, but he walks with a cane. If they had those, then yeah, that might be one of those situations where that might be less than authentic. But so this is the 100-mile rule. And the 100-mile rule is the go-to excuse for people who think that your private DBQs are fraudulent. And they just instantly go to it and they utilize it in a way that is not represented in the manual. And if they don't follow the specific process for how to, actually identify and make a DBQ inauthentic, then you can potentially take that to a higher level review and possibly have the DRO come up with a difference of opinion if they're unbiased. Now, you'll have a lot of them that are biased. They see it as a red flag, and any red flag, they're like a bull. Any red flag, they just run at it. And they don't look deeper than surface level of you live more than 100 miles, which is a tragedy, right? This is a tragedy that Doug Collins needs to correct. If he's going to allow us to do private DBQs, then they need to allow us to do private DBQs. If they don't want us going to individuals who do intake assessments on us and do one-time evidentiary reviews, then let our VA providers fill out our DBQs, the people that know us the best, right? Like this is a solvable problem by the secretary, and it doesn't require one single dollar to do it. So this is just a policy change to where if they're so concerned about fraud, they, they need to change. The VA needs to change, not the veteran. And I'm just concerned that they're going to push veterans who don't want to go to nurse practitioners who overturn specialist evidence, and they're going to make them start committing fraud by changing their address to match, the veterans or the examiners, be within 100 miles of the examiner. Like open up a PO box like 50 miles away from the person and just put that as your address temporarily. But I don't know, guys. But that's about all I got for you on this one. It's kind of shorter, so I'm going to be doing actual real, like how to, the elbow, the wrist, and stuff like that. I'm going to be doing another video like that today. So anyway, if you made it to the end, thank you so much. I'm sorry I keep having to go over this in private DBQs, but there's a sense of desperation in the community over the private DBQs. A lot of people are getting, like, they pay a lot of money, and that concerns me because in this current economy, apolitical, in this current economy, things are more expensive and your dollars should go somewhere else. You shouldn't have to pay to have a private DBQ, though I completely understand why you would, right? Your VA doctor will not fill one out. So what's your other option? Go to somebody that just arbitrarily, thinks that their opinion matters more than a specialist's opinion. And you might think that that's a niche example, but it happens more than you know. And when I weigh evidence, I side with the medical degree gets you a starting point. But how you format your evidence in that medical opinion or whatever, that matters a lot. I have had it to where nurse practitioners have outweighed normal doctors because the nurse practitioner utilized evidence, interwove it in with the veteran's circumstances and situations, and made a more complete and probative, understandable, speaking to the layperson, understandable approach. And I ended up siding with the nurse practitioner over the medical doctor to the veteran's advantage. But, it's just one of those things. Anyway, I have rambled enough, guys, but have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon in another video. Raider out.